Thank you to everybody for joining us this afternoon. Thanks for giving up your time to join us, part of this webinar series on Net Zero Week 2023. This being Empowering Education for a Sustainable Future, and our session this evening has a focus on curriculum. You might have seen there are other focuses such as corporate responsibility and future skills. So today we're going to be looking at curriculum with a really interesting and informed panel. We have Mark Southgate from Moby, we have Eddie Playfair from AOC, Ruth Martin from Newquay College, and Caroline Chipperfield from Petrox. Really great lineup, and each expert is going to make a presentation, and there'll be an opportunity to have some Q&A. Obviously you can put Q&A in the chat, and I'll be having a look at that as well. My role in Pearson is as Sustainability and Climate Lead, and that is in UK schools qualifications. I have also worked across our BTEC and our VQ sector in many subject areas. So really interesting to see what's going to come out of today's session. We're going to start with a presentation from Mark Southgate of Moby, who is going to, I guess, look at the sustainability issues facing the built environment and the skills that are required to take us into the future. So I'm going to hand over to Mark now. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, and hopefully you can now see the screens. I've just gone to the first one. I'll just go into slideshow. So can you hear me okay? Yeah. Good. Good. Okay. Yes. So thank you, Claire. My name is Mark Southgate. I'm grandly titled Chief Executive of Moby. Moby is quite a small organisation. We've got 5 trustees and two employees. We do everything we do through partnership, including with Pearson. And Moby exists to do a couple of things to try and improve the quality of home building in the UK. Because home is actually one of the most important pieces of our lives. We set up by George Clark, the architect TV presenter. And the other thing is to encourage young people into the built environment, because it's a great sector to get into. It's just quite often invisible to a lot of young people. So that's broadly what we exist to do. And I'm going to talk about 3 things. One, why is the built environment relevant in Zero Carbon Week? Then what we're doing around education and curriculum now, and then what might we be doing in the future. So that's what I'll cover. Yeah, so broadly, we're after greener, healthier and fairer homes. So that's one of the reasons why it's relevant for Zero Carbon Week. And we do it through 3 different things: design challenges, which I can talk about in Q&A. That's what I mean to getting young people into the built environment. We run that for schools, for FE and for higher education and for young professionals, just to get them involved in different aspects of the environment. We've done that in place, we've done that by theme, etc. Education pathways is what I'll mainly talk about, and our industry partnerships. So why built environment and zero carbon? Well, basically because 40% of our carbon emissions in the world come from the built environment. So if we are going to do anything about getting to zero carbon, then we have to do a lot around addressing the built environment. And if that weren't enough, and we do that through 2 things, you'll probably come across it. There is what is called embodied carbon and operational carbon. Embodied carbon is what you get from constructing a building. So that's the materials, that's the transportation, that's the manufacture of those materials, the mining of them in the first place. And then the operational carbon sort of does what it says on the tin. It's heating, it's cooling, it's ventilation, it's lighting, it's all the energy you use to operate a building. And if that weren't enough, we've also got between 27 and 29 million homes to retrofit in the UK by 2050 if we want to meet our zero carbon targets. So that is also a massive opportunity, a massive job, and something which is exercising a lot of people now around green skills, and I will talk on those. So I talk about modern construction skills. And that's not to say that anything we've done before isn't modern, but I think there's 3 key elements of what I call modern construction. Number 1, sustainability. How are we bringing sustainability into the building and the operation of those buildings? And that includes all the things we need to do around retrofit. And that is a massive cost with some massive numbers attached to it, in the hundreds of thousands of jobs required to be created to hit our 2050 targets. The second element is digital, which should be an increasing part of all construction. Is increasingly enabled. It's actually quite an enabler to reducing our carbon emissions as well through better quality. And then the third one is manufacturing as construction. So when we talk about construction, what we're talking about is making buildings. And we can make buildings in very different ways. And the construction is a traditional way of doing it, where you go out on site and do a lot of the works. Manufacturing is increasing the amount of construction you do within a factory or a closed environment before taking it on site. And there are broadly 4 ways of doing it. There's volumetric, modular, as people call it. There's panelized, where you make the panels in factories. There's components which are often delivered to site now anyway. So roof trusses will be delivered to site now. Conventionally, if you see a house being made, the sort of roof is effectively delivered in stages. And there's increasingly hybrid systems. So if you stay in hotels or go to student accommodation, you'll be familiar with bathroom pods, which are increasingly made and then delivered on site and fitted as a whole. And what that means, and this is what we're exploring, is it's sort of, I personally think we're covering a lot of what needs to be covered in existing courses, but they're not all together. So construction is quite often these traditional skills. You've got manufacturing and engineering quite often together. You've got various digital courses, and actually what we're looking at is somewhere in that diamond is where we sit in terms of what the curriculum required is, and that's what we're working with various colleges on now, and have done some already. Actually, where it sits in that magic diamond or diagram, I don't quite know yet, but I sort of intrinsically think about 80% of what we need is there, and we may be looking about filling another 20%, but that 80% doesn't exist as a course now, or hasn't existed until recently. Now in terms of the education pathways, we've worked with a range of partners to deliver some of this thinking from schools. We've got schools engagement programs through the BTEC and the HNC, HND, and up to higher education level, including BA Masters and actually a PhD program in Northumbria as well. But what we've done with Pearson is focus on these elements, so the digital skills in construction, the manufacturing technology, the alternative and new materials, which is a very large part of it, sustainability and low carbon, which includes retrofit. And I personally think that any young person coming into the construction, making a building sector these days needs to understand those things, because they will be the growing part of what they do in the future, and a growing demand of how we build our buildings. So we've worked on BTEC. So we've created with Pearson some optional units around housing, around off-site and on-site construction methods, and around renewable energy as some of the key drivers. So they're not the required units, but they're optional. You can take those in year 2 to make some of that more broadly available. And we did create AHNC in modern methods to construction and housing, which was probably, in hindsight, far too specialist. So we've worked together to create a higher national in modern methods construction, which is available to teach in September this year. And so you can see the sort of elements that's covering. These are a very boring slide, I'm afraid, but this is what it covers. You've got mandatory units around design, which is great, but the construction environment. But then you've got off-site construction, so understanding what that is about. The new technology, what new technology is coming in, building information modelling, which is part of a major part of the digital element, alternative energy or renewable energy, and then some of the more traditional aspects. And this is an attempt to try and begin to shape that. We're probably not completely there yet, and there's more we can do, but this at least makes that alternative offer available for people who want to work in this sector, and it's a growing sector. So we already make quite a lot of things off-site, and there are sectors of the construction environment, like I'd say prisons, schools, hospitals, student accommodation, which are already quite heavily using modern methods, as opposed to traditional, and it's beginning to grow as part of housing, etc. as well. We've also aimed to try and help train the trainers. So we've created, as part of a CITB contract with various partners, something called Offsite Ready, and that was an opportunity just to provide materials and then do some training through of trainers, and we continue to offer that as part of the Offsite Alliance, and that material is available and covering these aspects. So if you want to look, just look at www.offsiteready.com. And you will find it. I'll just type in Offsite Ready. You can go and find that material freely available. It's got teaching plans, lesson plans, etc. But I think part of our learning journey, and it'd be interesting to see what others have had to say, is it's all very well introducing new content, but actually you've got to help them deliver that content, and you can provide training for the trainers, but it still doesn't necessarily make the trainers very confident in delivering that content. And we've had those discussions with trainers. So with industry. So I mentioned the Offsite Alliance. I'm a director of the Offsite Alliance, not in my day job, as my sort of evening job, leading on skills. And we've created a couple of things: the skills work stream to look at what are the skills required in this newer part of construction, but also a subgroup of colleges who are looking to deliver the modern methods of construction or alternative methods of construction already. And the thing that has come out from them, and this is a map of some of the Offsite Alliance members, is what we really need now is the next stage of the journey is to try to connect with those people who do new things, so we can visit the sites, where they're being built or being assembled, maybe visit the factories where they're being manufactured, and inviting those industry traders to come in and talk to our students, our pupils, around what is modern methods construction, why is it different, what are you doing differently, etc. So that is our next phase at the moment. We're talking to various colleges about how we might do that. This is the selection of, it's almost a matchmaking exercise actually, so it's going to be around colleges who is interested in finding out where their sort of modern methods constructing industry is, and how do we match you up, and what is it you need. So is it site visits, is it visiting lecturers, is it all of the above? So that's sort of broadly where we are. And then I'd finish with something we're doing with Sunderland College and Sunderland Council. We were the third party of a Levelling Up Fund bid to partner Levelling Up communities and homes. That bid was successful, £27 million in total, £9 million to create this new centre. And this is a centre where we will start bringing all this together, using the unique elements of Sunderland, which is a rich manufacturing history, including currently Nissan, who've got a lot to tell us about how you manufacture things. Quite a lot of large-scale housing regeneration going on where they want to use modern methods of construction, a good environment where we can teach people and give them sort of fairly long-term employment in that house building. So this is an example of what can be achieved. I think we ought to, if our dreams come to be reality, have these sort of centres scattered all over the country. Not everywhere, but regional centres. But that's sort of where we are. And I think that's probably my last slide. That is my last slide. So I will finish there. So I canter through, but hopefully giving you an idea that we are beginning to think about what that new curriculum can look like. We started the journey. We're far from being perfect. But we've got lots of aspirations to do different things. And it'd be interesting to see whether others from different perspectives are finding the same thing around how we teach the zero carbon skills. And finally, I should have mentioned the whole green skills is another new element to that. What green skills do you need to retrofit houses? It's not just technology, it's around how you make those houses airtight before you apply air source heat pumps or other tech to help make them zero carbon. Thank you, Claire. I'll stop sharing now.
Brilliant, Mark. That was a really comprehensive overview. Really interesting. I was, when I was listening to that, I was really interested in the kind of new skills that are emerging and how we're supporting young people. But is there a way, or what can we do to support people who need upskilling, who are already in the sector, and what are the challenges between people emerging with new skills and new ways of doing things against people who perhaps need some more support to understand what's trying to be achieved?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So actually, both the BTEC and particularly the HNC units have been designed so they can also be short courses. So actually, they can be short courses taken by people in industry who may not do the full qualification, but need to train up in a certain aspect. They might decide that they need to understand digital better. So you're absolutely right, but it's not just for new entrants, it's for people who are in the system. Basically, government now requires, through Homes England and their sites, 25% of those sites to be built using modern methods of construction. So that means even if you're working traditionally, chances are you're going to be working on a site where there might be increasing use of different methods. And what it means is they run to different timetables. So the groundworks will be the same, but then, I was with a manufacturer up in Glasgow on Friday, and they had installed 23 modular units on a 5th floor in 2 days. But basically, they built the 5th floor of a building in 2 days, bringing in modules, and that's so totally different in terms of its turnaround. And the fact they need the site clear because they're bringing in cranes, they don't want workers around. It's partly around that, how's it different in terms of how I work and how do I have to adapt my sort of behaviours on the site if I'm going to be working with these people, as well as if I actually work in those areas.
Really interesting. Something else occurred to me actually as you were speaking about all the the different types of buildings, and obviously school buildings, college buildings are in different states and conditions across the country. Do you see any kind of emerging interest in linking school building work to climate action plans? Because I think FE sector is quite ahead with the climate action plan, maybe quite well advanced, but just wondered whether you saw any interest in overlap.
So there is in the 5 of the biggest government departments, of which Department for Education and one of those are quite aggressively pushing modern methods construction for a number of reasons. One of which is sustainability credentials, because if you manufacture it in a closed environment, it will probably result in less waste. It will certainly probably increase the performance. It will be better quality, but also they're also interested because you can build them faster. So if you've got a 6-7 week period over the summer holidays to do most of your work on a college or a school without major disruption, then modern methods construction can be deeply attractive, because the chances are you might get most of the major stuff done and the internal works won't be as disruptive. So they're interested in those terms. And of course, young people are deeply interested. It's one of the reasons why the sector is great. I talk to people about, if you want to do something about carbon, fantastic sector to work in, because it's in our hands as to whether we make things better or not. We can't afford to not make it better. So come and join us and be part of that. And some of our young people's challenges, we're about to announce one on retrofit. That was a young person's challenge about, well, how would you retrofit buildings? What would you do? Brilliant, inspired ideas. We need to be asking young people, because they've got very strong opinions about how we can do better than we've done up now. So yeah, I think schools are a very ripe area for improving our carbon and getting in a supply of young people to come in and shake our industry up.
Absolutely. You mentioned your design challenge. Want to talk about that a little bit at the end, or do you want to say something now? I had the idea that you wanted to talk about that a bit more.
I can just say, so it's one of our major means of getting through to young people. So we run them from primary school up to further and higher education, often the whole range. We've just done one in London, which Minecraft and Microsoft came on board, so they gave free licenses to schools in London. The design capability of young children, they are innate digital designers. They are so clever at design. The head of design at Moby said I wasn't doing this in second year at uni. I mean, they are just very, very clever. So why again can't you unleash their design skills and say, do you know what, you might be able to do this as part of your work, and they get quite excited. But they get very excited by it when a teacher says you can do Minecraft as part of your lesson. But it's just a great way to engage, and they get to start thinking about a built environment, and actually they've got really good thoughts about what you can do, what a good community is, what sustainability looks like. So yeah, it's a really good way of engaging young people.
Oh, that's brilliant. I'm just going to have to move around a bit because my light's gone off in here because I've been sitting still for too long. Sorry. A sustainable building that now I can't see anything before I introduce the next panelist. Unless any of the panelists want to say anything after Mark's presentation, I'll just give you a quick chance to do that while I sort out my lights. No. Gonna have to stay in the dark here for a little bit, sorry. It only affects me, not you, but anyway. Okay, we'll move on to hear from Eddie Playfair from the AOC. I'm going to hand straight over to you for your presentation, please, Eddie. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Claire, and hi, everyone. I'm going to try and share my screen and see if I can get into presentation. For some reason it's minimized. You may catch some rain noise, noisy rain in the background. It is actually raining in central London. Okay, I'm looking at the faces of people I can see. Is that okay? We've got my first screen. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mark. Okay, so yes, my name's Eddie. I'm in the policy team at the AOC, the Association of Colleges, and our job is to represent so we're a membership organisation for colleges in England, and our job is to support and represent our members. So many of you in the audience, I guess, will work for an AOC member college. I don't myself lead on sustainability across the board. My colleague Ian Munro does that, but I do have a role in leading on 16 to 18 curriculum, and therefore, well, every aspect of the curriculum and qualifications, particularly for young people. One of my other jobs is to lead on the student experience, student voice, student support, student welfare, student guidance. So I want to start really with the voice of students. And here's a quote from Amy Brazier, who was on the UK Climate Commission representing, at the time she was an FE student, I think she's probably at university now, but she was really representative of college students in saying that she was impatient to see more action being taken, more generally politically, but also in terms of colleges, and that students are keen to acquire the skills and knowledge to face the various crises that we're facing globally, including the climate crisis, and the notion that every job is going to be a green job, so that green skills are important for every learner, for every student, regardless of where they go next. And praising the progress that has been made, lots of progress has been made, but pressing us really as a sector to do more and to go faster. And our chief executive, David Hughes, again reflecting that in terms of we needing an education system that embeds climate responsibility in everything we do, and that's a top priority. And there's a list of actions that we've been taking and partners we've been working with. I'm not going to go through them blow by blow, but you've got some, when you get the slides, you'll see there are some hot links there which you can follow through. So for example, the roadmap, we have a roadmap for colleges to work out where they are on the journey towards sustainability, and lots of support through the AOC, but also EAUC, the environmental, I can't remember what it's called now, Association for Universities and Colleges, I think is the title. So that's a joint HE and FE organization. And ETF, very important. This is our staff development organization, and SOS, Students Organizing for Sustainability, and I'll talk about CLP in a moment. And of course, we welcome and we work with the DFE now that they have a sustainability and climate change strategy. So I just want to say a few things about what we know about the curriculum post-16, and where and how much coverage of sustainability there is. I did a piece of work for the ETF a couple of years ago in terms of an audit of all the courses that students are enrolled on in colleges. And there was also a separate piece of work around case studies of good practice. And I mean, basically what I found was quite depressing in the sense that if you take a measure of substantial broad ESD coverage, education for sustainable development coverage, only 0.5% of all post-16 enrollments were actually on qualifications which had that level of coverage. Now that is increasing, and of course there are some courses that have brilliant coverage, but 99.5 didn't have that broad coverage that would equip a learner with a good understanding of sustainability. So that represents 18,000 enrollments, which is a decent number, but it's still only, as I say, 0.5%. And there were only 11 qualifications that we identified that had that broad coverage. However, if you add in qualifications that touch on ESD, that have some partial coverage, that does come up to nearly 4%. And again, I'm sure that's increasing. I'm sure since we did the audit, that's increasing. And the biggest single enrolling qualification that had good broad ESD coverage is actually geography. Good old geography, which actually is a threatened subject. It's a vulnerable subject. The numbers are declining, but actually it's one of those subjects with environmental science, which doesn't have very many enrollments, but it's one of those subjects that provides good coverage of sustainability issues. So that was the audit. I'm going to say a few words about what I think could be done to address the problem. And I just really want to start by distinguishing between the entitlement for every student. In other words, what is it that every student, regardless of what level, what course they're studying, what their progression plans are, the kind of basic level of understanding of the climate emergency and also sustainability generally that they all need. And we don't have that entitlement. There isn't an entitlement. There's no expectation that every student will have that. And so I guess what we would suggest would be some kind of, there are units, there are modules, there are short qualifications that could be used. But the point is that really we should embed that in our in our programs, in our whether it's in our tutorial programs or as taught short units or modules. So that's one aspect. The other aspect, of course, is to integrate and embed green issues, environmental awareness, sustainability issues in all other programs, including technical and vocational programs, and not just those that have a specific green skills element, whether it's construction or environmental management, and so on. And also just that acknowledgement that sustainability is not just about, inverted commas, the environment or nature. It's actually a political issue. It's an economic issue. The ramifications go right across the curriculum: sociology, history, science, English, maths, you name it. So it's not just the obvious, the usual suspects. We developed a program called the Carbon Literacy Program, which was exactly that, a short course for all learners, and it was rolled out and piloted by many colleges, and thousands of learners have now taken it. It was modeled on an HE course, a university level course developed in Manchester by Manchester Met, and that's been very successful, and we see that as a good model, a good starting point. It wasn't a full sustainability program, but it did cover carbon literacy, and some of you may have experienced that with your learners, some of you may have run it with your learners, and staff, of course, also benefited from it. And so the government response so far in terms of the curriculum seems to have been around natural history, and there's a really great natural history GCSE being proposed, which is fine, but of course, as I said earlier, an awareness of sustainability goes way beyond fostering a love of nature, great as that important as that is. So I think that doesn't itself address the challenge enough. And of course, the other question is how many people will actually take it? How many people will actually study that subject? I'm lucky enough to have been involved in an Erasmus Plus project, an international project in Europe, where we looked at sustainability education in vocational education across 7 European countries. And I'm going to apologize for using the same slide that Mark used, but one of the things that comes across from countries where there's good practice is that they base that, they use the framework of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, because it's a very good framework, but also because it's an internationally, globally accepted, recognized framework, which is seen as important and seen as a priority by the UN and so many other agencies. So it's a good basis for any kind of program that is attempting to be, to have global impact and to connect with what's happening in other countries. But also we know that other things that work well in other countries and in England are a social action approach where young people are encouraged to think about, environmental issues and do something about them, take action collectively, or do projects, whether it's a research project or an action-based project. And there's some very effective examples of that in England and in other countries. So we can learn from other countries, and there's some great practice here as well. So there's the slide. I mean, I was in a college in the Netherlands a few weeks ago, and I've seen this also in Latvia and Austria and the Basque Country, Italy, where the visibility of these SDGs is very high in some colleges. So you have that sense that the students actually think about the 17 SDGs. They understand what they mean. They're thinking them through in terms of their own lives and their own education and their own future work, and it's very visible around the college. I don't see it quite so much in England, so I think there's still a way to go in terms of the, having the SDGs on the agenda and have them visible. So that's my slides. A very quick introduction. I think we've got a long way to go still. Very happy to pick up any questions either today in the chat or after, in the Q&A session, or if you want to email me, I'm very happy to kind of signpost some of the work that's happening in colleges, and also you may find that slide with the links useful as well. So thank you very much, Claire, and back to you.
Thanks, Eddie. Really interesting. For me, it seems to be collaboration is really important to achieve progress. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, collaboration between colleges to produce resources, to develop the confidence of teachers, and to work, but also working with other agencies, working with universities. I mean, the CLP, the Carbon Literacy Project, came about because a university had actually developed something really good for their students as a general awareness raising effort, and we simply took that and adapted it for an FE. You know, we sort of pitched it at level 2-ish, and adapted it for a college audience. So I think learning from each other, learning from good practice. We've learned a great deal from Scotland. I mean, Scotland seems to be several steps ahead of us in terms of embedding sustainability in the curriculum. So you just need to work with people who are a few steps ahead of you, and having a DFE strategy has helped a lot, because we can kind of show how the work we're doing maps against the DFE work. It would be good perhaps if Ofsted, who after all inspect us, made it clear that this is something that they're interested in. I think their view at the moment seems to be, we'll praise it, you know, we'll praise good practice in sustainability education if we see it, but we don't necessarily expect to see it. So that feels like, you know, we need perhaps a stronger view from Ofsted as well. So yes, you're right, Claire. Partnership is key, and support. And our job is to provide support to colleges to help them on the journey.
Interesting, thanks, Eddie. I mean, one of the things that we found recently in our annual school report, where we survey 6,000 educators, barriers to kind of teaching around sustainability. You know, there's a huge desire to do that, sustainability and climate education, but two of the things that were noted as being really essential if this was going to happen in the change in the curriculum was that age appropriate resources, and that it's a legal requirement. It's interesting that you bring up you know, kind of inspection part of schools as well as being important. I want to put you on the spot a little bit about the SDGs, actually, because what is it about it works well in other countries, you said, using the 17 SDGs as a framework, but actually we've been a bit slower here to pick that up. Do you know why that is? Do you know what would help?
I don't know. I mean, I think the British government does use the SDGs as a framework. I just don't think it's quite got itself embedded in the kind of mindset of the education department, the DFE, and I think it just needs to. It's a cultural shift. It's a culture shift, and it just needs to be referenced and you know, used as a driver, really, of education policy. I mean, there are lots of things that schools and colleges are expected to do on top of, you know, deliver qualifications. I mean, if you think of the prevent agenda, you know, the British values, maths, you know, maths retakes, English retakes for students who don't have grade 4s. I mean, all these things are, you know, regarded as important by policymakers, and we then get support to implement them. It feels like sustainability has to crank up. We have to, you know, the government needs to crank it up a notch to take it to that level of something that really everyone needs to do and everyone will need support with, and it's, you know, and needs a bit of resourcing. So I don't know. I mean, the practices are different in different countries, but one thing I saw in lots of countries was that profile, as I said, of the SDGs. They're visible, and you know, you pass them in the corridor, you pass the displays in the corridor, or the one college had a little sort of seating area which had the SDGs plastered all over the walls around it, and, you know, illustrations connecting it to the work of the college. So it's a discussion point. It's part of the culture of the organization. And you celebrate things like, you know, we've stopped using gas boilers and we've gone over to heat pumps across the whole college. You know, you celebrate that, you tell students about it, and you raise the profile of that, and it becomes part of the daily conversation. Or, you know, we've made our canteen more sustainable, or we're recycling 96% of, yeah, whatever it is. You know, it's part of the daily conversation of the institution.
I really like that phrase. Thanks, Eddie. I really like that part of the daily conversation and sort of, you know, not letting your learning stop where you're learning, but kind of taking that throughout the whole of your life in all the areas that you kind of take part in. I really like that. Thank you so much, Eddie. I don't think we've got any more questions from the chat. So I'm going to move to Ruth Martin now, please. And Ruth, I forgot to say you were from Cornwall College, I think, in the introduction. So sorry, I think you're head of university there from Cornwall College. So if you're ready with your presentation, that would be great to hear from you now. Thanks, Ruth.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you, Claire. And mine should sort of play on quite nicely from what Eddie has just been talking about as well. So hopefully you can see my screen. I just will that make it go into, yeah. So I was asked to talk about sort of essentially a case study about what the Cornwall College group are doing, and I'm specifically from the Newquay University Centre, which is a higher education centre essentially. And as you can see from my background and the slides, we specialise in zoology, surf and marine programmes. So as Eddie was saying, you know, we're perfectly placed actually to have a lot of sustainability in our courses, and we do cover that. So it's just interesting in terms of then looking at the wider Cornwall College group, which is much more varied in terms of what it offers and the curriculum that it covers. So just again, in terms of a recap in some ways of what Eddie was talking about why it's important and why we need to address that in education and the work that we're doing. So just important to recognise why it is vital that we do something about it, why we need to act, and why we need to actually take people on this journey with us as well. So in terms of obviously changing human behaviour to actually either slow or control resource use and plan for what the future world is going to look like. Again, in terms of what Eddie was saying, students are looking for this, they're much more clued up about this, and they do look at the Sustainable Development Goals in school, in that curriculum, and so they are familiar with those concepts by the time they come out of school at 16 or at 18. And also obviously with Ofsted, there is the social justice aspect of that too. So it is an aspect that we can cover in our curriculum areas to sort of address that too, but we can go further than that, obviously. So in terms of the Department for Education vision, you're all aware of what the plans are for that, but tending to look quite specifically at the minute about green skills and specific green and sustainability training, as it were. And we're just sort of on our journey at Cornwall College about what we do with that and how we work with that moving forward with our students. So the situation that we've currently got is that we have been offering the bootcamp in sustainable development, and that's been quite an interesting programme to put forward. As I said, we offer foundation degrees and BScs, specifically at Newquay in zoology, surf and marine programmes. We have a site at the Eden Project in Cornwall, where they run a master's in land and ecological restoration, which is also an apprenticeship. So we do have quite a strong sustainability offer, certainly at higher education. But that's made us think about what we offer at further education. And so we're going through some of our systems and processes, not only with the net zero target in mind, but also with a curriculum focus in mind too. And so looking at some of the documentation that we use, for example, so our schemes of work. So again, as Eddie was talking about, in terms of we have to embed safeguarding, we have to embed ED&I now. We've got all of that, we do all of that. This is the next stage in that journey now, to start embedding sustainability in exactly the same way that we've done that. So it's about training our staff to do that, but it's also about them being able to recognise the sustainability they're currently offering. So, you know, that rather than making an assumption that there are pockets of good practice, as it were, in terms of sustainability education, and pockets where it's not being covered, actually we need to audit what our baseline currently is, so we can map where the gaps are and put training in specifically for that. So again, sorry Eddie to keep referring to you, but it is about a journey, and we're all on that journey. It doesn't matter where our starting point on that journey is. And I say to students and staff that it's a bit like going to the gym. Unfortunately, you don't get fit and you can stop going. You have to continue going to the gym to continue being fit. And sustainability is a bit like that, really, that we are all on this journey and we can't get off it. And so it's taking people on that journey with us now as we move forward. And that includes students, staff, all the stakeholders, essentially. And we're quite lucky at Cornwall College that our governors are really, really hot on this, and they're really keen for our sustainability committee to be successful. And so in terms of looking at all the systems and processes, they are keen to see movement on that and that being embedded now. So it sort of seems that we've got two options really about it. We can start looking at new courses, which is essentially where the government is going, and train more specialists in that. Or actually we can start looking at our old courses and our current provision and start to embed sustainability in those in the meantime, before the new courses, which I understand are being revised to include some of this stuff and embed it in the courses, so that actually everybody has green skills. Because as we know, moving into the future, everybody is going to have to engage with this, whether they sort of are comfortable with that. They are going to have to engage with it at all sorts of different levels. And so we want to work with them to obviously make them as comfortable as they possibly can and feel informed about it as they go into the sector and start working in the sector. So we're actually looking at, obviously we can't change the courses and the curriculum that we're currently offering. That's not within our gift to do right now. But how can we embed this into the student experience then? So looking at our tutorial provision, for example, and our extracurricular stuff, but also looking at the curriculum and where we can shoehorn reference to sustainability and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In addition to that, though, of course, the new guidelines around from the government in terms of what they're looking for educational establishments. So there are opportunities around looking at the wider student experience, so not just literally the curriculum and what they're being taught and what they're being assessed on, but also the other aspects of it as well. So it creates a much more holistic experience for the students. So we can start looking at the campus grounds. And again, in Cornwall College, we are really, really privileged to have quite extensive campus grounds. I mean, actually, we do have 2 farms as well as part of our land-based provision. So in terms of the National Education Nature Park, that's quite an exciting concept for us. And with that, obviously, you can start looking at student involvement around biodiversity surveys. We've done a palm oil survey at Newquay, so we are now a sustainable palm oil champion for Newquay Town. And they're quite easy things to do, actually, but they're quick wins with students, and students like to have achieved that. And it is something that they can say that they've done and they've made a change for. And then, of course, improved well-being. So we all know that whilst it's beneficial to us all to have a healthy planet, actually there's more and more evidence from research to suggest that direct interaction with nature is beneficial for our well-being. And there's been a lot of that, obviously, since COVID and the pandemic. So in terms of our students then being in a better place to learn and be open to learning in terms of a curriculum, then actually we can use some of those natural spaces for that as well. Talked already a little bit about partnerships and new collaborations. So given the fact that we are in education, and that's not limited to young people, that can include all sorts of interactions in all sorts of different ways, actually, informal and formal learning opportunities. So working with the workforce of the future, working with all the stakeholders within the sectors to actually upskill the workforce to be working towards net zero, understand what that means, but also thinking about that in a wider context as well. So as we know, there are some issues around net zero and how you achieve that and whether that's meaningful, but actually there are lots of other things that can be considered within that from a sustainability perspective as well. So it seems to me that we are in a unique opportunity, really, in a unique position to really train all of the students that we interact with and get them comfortable with these concepts so that they can make informed decisions when they go into the workplace, and go back to that first slide that I had about changing human behaviour and making a change for the planet so that there is actual action taken. So to just sort of finish off, this is where we are now in terms of what we're planning to do to try and embed this into the curriculum. Like I say, in some ways, the net zero bits are really objective. They're quite easy to measure and they're quite easy to have an impact on. You can have a look at your utility bills and you can make changes on them. The curriculum is a little bit more complex in terms of measuring the impact that you're having and getting people engaged with that and taking them with you, like I say. So part of what we're trying to do is work with staff to, in a really sort of non-confrontational way, a really supportive way, so that we're not trying to put people out of their comfort zones too much, because there will be some people who are further along on this journey, like I say, than others, and are more comfortable with it naturally. And there will be others who are right at the start of this, and that isn't an issue, it's not a problem, and we want to support them to take them along. But we've got to start with the staff, because they're the ones that are interacting with students on a daily basis, and they need to be the advocate for this curriculum embedding, basically. So what we're looking at is CPD for our curriculum area managers, so that we can get into all areas of the business, essentially, so that we can address this in all sectors that we are interacting with, and then trying to embed sustainability in all aspects of our college business. So that includes curriculum, but it also includes the business support. So looking at our procurement, for example, looking at our catering, and so on and so forth, so that we can make sure that actually everybody is on board with this. Carbon literacy we've talked about already today, and we are mapping against the AOC roadmap to some degree. And so we're hoping to roll out that carbon literacy training. We're in the process of getting some actually sort of validated by Manchester to be able to do that sort of on a bespoke basis for us. And then, like I say, auditing the sustainability currently included in the curriculum. We're going to use the Sustainable Development Goals to do that. And I know that that's perhaps a bit of a clunky tool in some ways. And I know there's, you know, in other forums that I've been in, there's been some discussion about whether they're the best thing to do that with. I think they're probably the best that we've got right now, and therefore that's kind of what we're going to go with, for exactly the reasons that Eddie laid out earlier that I don't need to go into. But we are going to have to do a little piece of work around the staff awareness of those development goals as well, because we can't assume, obviously, that everybody is going to be familiar with them. And so it's kind of really, as I say, making sure that we get that baseline right, so that we're not patronizing people, but we're also not assuming that they've got all the knowledge available to them right now. Once we've done that audit, we can identify missed opportunities and barriers. So we can identify where there are gaps in the curriculum and start working with staff about how we're going to fill those gaps. And obviously also what the barriers to those that inclusion might be as well. Is it a lack of understanding? Is it a stakeholder engagement issue? What is it that might be preventing that development in there? And then creating our own roadmap, essentially, with some really clear aims and then objectives and then KPIs for us to measure that over the next 5 to 8 years. So that's our next plan. So that is essentially a subcommittee of our overall sustainability committee, where we have a curriculum lead and an estates lead, essentially a business support lead, who are then driving those aims and objectives through. And that's it. So thank you very much. I'll stop sharing and go back to Claire.
Thanks, Ruth. Really interesting and so important to understand that, to get that baseline, to understand that everyone's at a different point and that's okay, and there's just different strategies. Really interesting as well to how you're including young people and the sustainability journey. And I just wondered, you know, the motivation might be obvious, but maybe not. Wondered, you know, how you manage to do that, how you take the students with you, because they're also going to be at different starting points depending on their journey up to this point. You know, what the barriers are to getting students involved. Because, yeah, if you have anything to say on that, would be great.
I think it's about, the first bit is identifying through the audit what is already being covered and really celebrate that. And, you know, I think Eddie's idea about having the sustainable development goals around is a really great idea, so that they feel that they're on the journey already, that they're not starting something completely brand new. So if we can unpick that in some way through this audit, where we can say, oh, you're already doing this, you didn't even know, imagine what you could do if you did engage with it and where we could go from here. And that's a really exciting prospect.
Thanks, Ruth. There's no other questions in the chat, and there was a great presentation. Thank you. I'm just looking at the time, and I think what we'll do now is move on to hear our final presentation of this session from Dr. Caroline Chipperfield, who's from Petroc and is Director for Higher Education in North Devon. So Caroline, if you're ready to share your screen. Yes, you are ahead of me. Thanks very much. I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was so anxious to share my screen, I forgot to unmute myself. So good afternoon, everyone. And it's a great pleasure to speak to you this afternoon about our approach at Petroc. And I think just to really summarise what other speakers have said, our approach is both looking at ways that we can have a curriculum that empowers and enables our students to play an active role in their general life that makes decisions about sustainability and net zero, but also enables those students who really want to get specialist careers in these areas to have those skills and those opportunities as well. So you kind of have to have that education for everyone, but also make sure you've got the curriculum and the provision there to really develop some of those specialist areas that are coming on stream at the moment. Just need to oh, there we go. Right, so a little bit about who we are, just to get some context. We're a college in North Devon and in Tiverton, and we are so lucky to be at the heart of a UNESCO biosphere. So that includes the island of Lundy, the coastline of North Devon, the two moors, Dartmoor and Exmoor. So it gives us a huge kind of environmental playground really for both our staff and students to explore, both through curriculum and more informally. We also have one of the Institutes of Technology on our site as well. And I think part of the challenge, but also opportunity, is how we can bring technology into the sustainability and environmental discussion, whether that's, again, enabling sustainability or recording it, measuring it, getting the data behind what we need to find. So that the interlink between technology and sustainability is particularly important. We have a broad range of provision, HE and FE, and just across the water from where I'm sitting over in Appledore, there's going to be a new innovation centre looking at clean maritime. So fantastic opportunity for those students to work with businesses and to really see a very different future for many of those students who are living here. As discussed by other speakers, partnership and collaboration. We work with businesses and schools. And what's so exciting is that we feel that we're sitting on this kind of edge of a skills revolution in the region. and the region has said they want to be the first region to be net zero economy, and you know, it's wonderful to have this fantastic aspiration, but what does that mean for young people, returners to education, colleges, schools, and employers in the region? And just to say that climate emergency is embedded in our college strategy as well. So again, it's right at the heart of what we do. Just again, to give you an idea of what is happening, and I'm sure it's happening right across the UK, if not globally, but this massive drive really for renewables, for green hydrogen, aquaculture, environmental mapping and monitoring, agriculture, again, going through a bit of a technological revolution. And so we need skills and workforce, but ultimately curriculum to enable these jobs, these careers to be developed. And one of the interesting things to note, I think, is, like everyone, sustainability and green skills shouldn't just be limited to these programs, because everybody is going to be affected by, and needs to understand what is green hydrogen, how does it work, how is it going to affect them, what kind of cars they're going to drive, all of that. So it's really exciting, but I think there's a massive challenge that we within colleges have to, have to be quite agile really in responding to some of these demands. So to summarize that bit there, it's opportunity, 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 pretty scary. But I think both in the formal curriculum, the enrichments, and in partnership that we have, it has to be a regional endeavour, but it's also at the heart of our college strategy. So looking at the curriculum, in particularly the 16 to 19, I'm going to give some examples of what we're doing there, and some of the enrichment activities that we do, and also how we can promote and engage, especially young people, but returners to education as well. So we have sustainability embedded throughout our curriculum. A bit like Ruth, we are undertaking a mapping of what that really means. I think where we write our own courses, it's much easier to embed that, and certainly maybe at levels 4+, it's much easier. And therefore, to make sure that all our students have access to some sustainability education, we have a tutorial program which looks at SDGs and gets students familiar, works through those. And we have a part of the tutorial program is a competition at the end of that section of tutorials to really embed what that means. But I think the real challenge is looking at that taught curriculum and in making sure that it's is higher than the 3%, that sustainability education needs to be at the heart of all of them. What also we do, and I think is maybe again a bit easier, is to look at the ways that we can bring sustainability and net zero into the wider curriculum. So through work experience and internships, and we're lucky enough to have a lot of environmental organisations or companies that have sustainability as a priority. But by having that work experience, by doing projects, by working with those employers, again, it's another complementary way to challenge some views, but also develop a bit more expertise into the curriculum. We also have a sustainability academy, which is part of our enrichment program, where they have speakers, they do projects. And for those students who are particularly interested in this area, then it gives them that opportunity to build a broader network, to really challenge some of their views and to make a difference to some of our communities. And another way, again, is volunteering. So we encourage all our students and staff to volunteer. And for some, you can use that volunteering experience as part of their assessment within the curriculum. But again, it's about broadening that mindset and really complementing what they do in the taught curriculum. One of the ways that you can bring to life what we need to do is through community engagement, and a lot has been said about collaboration, and I think it is absolutely key. An example, we're working with Appledore Primary School. We're working with the teachers and students there to design a micro reserve and also an outdoor science lab. And so that involves the primary school children, it involves some of our T-level students, our HE students from a number of disciplines, all working together on a community project, learning, working with each other, but also learning some of those wider skills as well. We work with the North Devon Biosphere on their SWIFT project, to try and encourage Swifts back onto our campus, and organisations like Plastic Free North Devon as well. One of the major activities is about raising aspirations, I think, and engaging with the community. So this is an example of an event that happened last week. We called it Marine Futures. And in the morning, we had over 100 businesses come in and talk about what was happening with all of the renewables and green hydrogen and how they could get involved. But because we had all these amazing people on site, we also then invited schools in the afternoon to meet, to do workshops. And then again in the evening, we had community and parents. And I think it's you need to engage not just younger people, those returning to education, but also the community and parents as influencers. We too are running skills boot camps, and we have 3 starting in September, one on renewables, one on ecology and conservation, and another on building information modelling, which is BIM. We see these as a way of engaging community and bringing in some of that expertise. But by running these boot camps, we hope then to look at, well, what would you need next? What are the next levels of skills that you need? How do we provide a pipeline into these programs? But ultimately, it's, you know, from delivering these, what does that mean for our curriculum, and how can we enhance it? How can we take some of the learning from short courses into the rest of our provision? And then just a little bit of a kind of how-to really, and looking back at what we've done. And you know, first of all, place. It's kind of looking at who we are, where we are, what we've got to play with, what's on our doorstep, and then how do we embed that into our curriculum? The second was about authenticity, and ultimately, you know, we are part of a much bigger ecosystem across the Southwest with their priorities, and how can we, through curriculum, through delivery of those programs, fulfill the priorities of the town, city, or region. Suitability, is it best delivered through formal or informal or enrichment activities? And how can we best do that? And then ultimately collaboration, because I think sustainability is one of those areas that really needs a multi-agency approach. You know, it needs many people bringing their expertise, and ultimately that's what sustainability is about. It's, you know, ensuring you've got that longevity and that you've got everybody involved. So that was just a kind of quick 4 points really on how I summarize really what we've done, and just to say thank you for that, and if you need any more information, just to contact me. But over to you, Claire.
Thanks very much. I'm sure people will be in touch for more information, because you touched on so many interesting things there. There was a question in chat about, could you expand on the Sustainability Academy model, but I'm not sure whether you did, whether that was included in community engagement and the other things that you spoke to. But if there's anything else,
yeah, happy to Yeah, Claire, just happy to do a couple of seconds there. Yeah, so
Thank
we
you.
have our A-level students can, as part of their enrichment, join a number of academies, and our Sustainability Academy is one of those. And it's organised by one of the A-level teachers who invites speakers in, and they work on a project throughout the year. The idea is ultimately to that become an EPQ module, but it's generally been much more informal. So it's about trying to get all those students who are really interested in sustainability together, organise a programme for them, and develop whatever they are interested in for that year, really.
Thank you. I'm just going to check chat. Thomas, did that answer your question? I think you could probably contact Caroline to get some more information.
Happy
but
to. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very generous of you. But yeah, no more messages coming in. So thank you so much. Yeah, really interesting. I think there's so much going on in your area, isn't there? There's kind of, with the marine developments going on, and
there's loads, but I think, you know, it's happening all over, and it's about knowing what those regional priorities are. You know, there are wind farms developing off the Norfolk coast, off the coast of Teesside, up in Scotland, and the drive for renewables is huge. So it's almost, yes, I've identified what we're doing, but I think if you look at a region by region, there are a lot of things going on. It's a very hot agenda. So yeah, as long as you familiarize yourself what those priorities are, and I think it's a great way of just doing the checks and balances for the curriculum that you deliver.
Really rich opportunities to look regionally, locally, regionally, where you are, to see what's going on, that you can then start trying to embed in the products that you're delivering, in your curriculum that you're delivering. I think it's a really good example of how to do that. We are nearly at the end of our session, so just a last call if anybody wants to put any other questions in the chat. Thomas has said that you did cover that question well. Thank you very much on Sustainability Academy. But yeah, last call for any questions from anybody, for any of our panelists, for Eddie, Ruth, Caroline or Mark, if you heard their presentations. While you're thinking about if you've got any questions, I'm just going to ask for any or all of our panelists actually to think about what might be a really useful takeaway for everyone attending today, thinking how important it's been to hear from all of you about collaborative practice, working with others, and really broad kind of stakeholder engagement, from parents to government, students, teachers, so many organisations involved. If you would perhaps give some advice on how to get engaging with, that's the right word, engaging and collaborating with other organisations. Anybody like to take that, or would you all like to give one piece of advice on how to work effectively with other people, how to bring other people on board on your journey with you? Who's going to go first? Eddie, thank you.
I would just say if you're building partnerships with, well, I mean, Caroline and Ruth will know this, but if you're building partnerships with local organizations or campaigning groups or volunteering organizations, it takes time. You need to, it takes commitment, and that commitment needs to be sustained over a long period of time. I was really pleased to hear about the experience of Petroc with the EPQ, because we're also doing at AOC, we're also doing a big push on student, project-based learning. And what the EPQ or HPQ does is it allows you to have content, to teach some content, but also to allow students to develop their own projects and get accredited for that. So it's a really nice model, and it's not used anything like enough. My final question was going to be really directed at Ruth and Caroline, and just to ask what your experiences of, if any, of the idea of climate anxiety, and whether that feels like a real thing, and whether, I mean, my instinct is always that understanding things better, understanding things more is good. But is there any sense in which, you know, talking about these big global crises, these big global challenges, does create, you know, anxiety in students? And if so, what do we do about it? Maybe that's too big a topic to embark on at this stage in the webinar, but I think it's something that's often, it's sometimes used as a reason why we wouldn't talk about, you know, the reality of the climate emergency. And I'm always a bit worried that we're going to kind of self-censor ourselves a bit because you know, it might cause anxiety. So I'm just wondering at a practical level whether you've confronted that and you know, any tips on that.
I think from our perspective, it's about being active and activists in a really positive way. And there is a level of anxiety, and there's a level of kind of, well, what can I do as an individual? You know, it's not really going to make a difference. It needs to be at a much higher, bigger strategic level. But I think part of the education and is you can be an activist, and by volunteering, you know, what you do that day can make a difference. So I think that's probably the way that we approach it.
Thanks, Caroline. I think we're at time, unless, did anybody else want to say anything urgently? Sorry, Ruth, were you about to speak?
I was just going to say, I'm anxious, aren't you? I think, you know, it is a thing. We've got to do something about it. But we've got to equip young people with the tools to do something about it. And the reality is we know the answers to the problem. And so we've got to implement them. And the only way we can do that is by big change. So we do have to make them activists, exactly like Caroline says, but that's political activists as well as environmental activists.
Yeah, and I was just going to follow with empowerment. Yeah, I think the younger generation are quite rightly looking at us and saying, you've landed us in this problem. So I think we need to show them how they can help themselves get out of it and help us get them out of it as well. So, you know, showing where they can make a real difference. And all the industries we looked at are all making a real difference, actually. So you can choose to get into industries which are going to make a big difference in terms of tackling climate change.
Absolutely, and really powerful points to finish on. I think the seriousness of the situation, but also that every action can make a difference, and you can do that, you know, students and teachers, educators can do that everywhere in many different ways. I think in this webinar has been really interesting to see the scope and the scale from tiny actions into, you know, huge kind of aims to be a first net zero economy. You know, really the difference in or the size of that scale is really interesting to see. Thank you so much. Becky's put something in chat about all the Reform Level 3 quals will have SDGs mapped to them to support with sustainable content delivery and centre strategies. That's useful to know. And I know there's been a couple of points on project qualifications. Just to let you know, Pearson have partnered with IEMA, the Institute for Environment Management Assessment. So if a learner is taking an EPQ and has a focus on sustainability, they can then get connected up with IEMA as well. So really quite exciting development there, and a whole access to green skills networks and careers advice. So you might want to look at IEMA. They're really, we had Martin Baxter talking yesterday from IEMA, so it's a really interesting development as well. So I think that just leaves me to say thank you so much to our panelists. Really fantastic presentations. I learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone joining did. So thank you everybody who's participating today. Thank you everyone for joining, giving up your time this afternoon. I hope you've taken something really useful away with you. And just thank you and have a lovely evening. Safe travels home wherever you are. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Claire.